From how witches were really dealt with to a shocking fact about one of the new wonders of the world, today we look at 10 lies your school taught you. Number 10. Blue blood. One of the most commonly perpetuated facts that is actually false is that our veins look blue on the outside because deoxygenated blood is blue. Science teachers have been telling this myth for decades now, and it has absolutely no basis in science. This myth probably started by an unchecked hypothesis in a bygone time before medicine and science became as advanced as they are today. The truth is, when blood is without oxygen, it's actually dark red. So why do our veins appear blue? Scientists say this has to do with the way we perceive light. Our perception of color is due to the varying wavelengths of light. Red light permeates much deeper into the flesh than blue light. Because of this, veins closer to the skin are found to reflect more blue light back into our eyes. Not all people have veins with bluish hues either, as varying skin tones can make the veins appear anywhere from green and brown to dark purple. Number 9. The Great Emancipator. Abraham Lincoln is glorified as the ultimate abolitionist and an opponent to slavery from the day he stepped into office. But this simply isn't true. Though he did eventually set in motion and sign into law the 13th Amendment, which made slavery illegal in the United States, it wasn't very high on his list of priorities. Lincoln was not a promoter of slavery, but he also wasn't an abolitionist. In fact, if he were alive today, some of his views would be considered racist. But as all great leaders, Lincoln was a very complex thinker, and part of what made him great was his ability to change his mind when he heard a better idea. From the beginning, Lincoln believed that slavery was morally wrong, but knew it was a dangerous political subject, and did not move towards its abolition until it presented strategic advantages. He didn't even think to issue the Emancipation Proclamation until it presented itself as a way to win the war against the Confederacy. By freeing the slaves in the southern states, that's right, it excluded slave states that were a part of the Union. It effectively crippled the South's economy and enabled the North to enlist the slaves who fled captivity. Lincoln was quoted as saying, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." In addition to thinking the way to solve the slavery problem was sending the slaves back to Africa, Lincoln also initially believed that white and black people should not be equal citizens and was against the idea of black people voting or holding positions in government and marrying white people. By the time of his death, Lincoln had become much more open-minded, and though he may not have been the infallible emancipator that he is sometimes viewed as today, he did fight for emancipation against fierce opposition and was more progressive than most of his contemporaries. Number 8. Taste buds. If you can picture a map of a tongue that has all the types of tastes mapped out on it, we're sorry to tell you, but you've been duped, whether intentionally or not. The modern version of the map was invented in 1942 by a man aptly named Edwin Boring and is simple in its layout. The map has your sweet taste buds on the tip, then moving back the salt, sour, and bitter taste buds. So, what's the problem with this picture? You can taste all of these tastes anywhere on your tongue. In fact, each taste bud can have up to 100 receptors for each type of taste. The map is also invalid as it ignores the 5th type of taste, which is umami, for which the simple definition is savory. There's no excuse for this not being included either, as umami was discovered in the early 20th century. So why is the map still being included in anatomy and science textbooks? Your guess is as good as ours. Number 7. I cannot tell a lie. This list is bound to make you question everything from your childhood at some point, so we might as well get right to it. George Washington did not chop down a cherry tree. This legend about the United States' first president was probably started in a biography by Parson Weems that was written after Washington died. In the biography, called The Life of George Washington, Weems even has a subtitle that states it contains curious anecdotes. This was an attempt to highlight Washington's qualities so that children would honor and look up to him. But history book writers and biographers after Weems left out that these were tall tales and wrote the story down as if it were fact. However, George Washington was considered to be honest for a politician of his time. On a side note, he also didn't have wooden teeth. They were made of ivory, cow teeth, and teeth bought from slaves. Number 6. Burn the witch. If you're picturing the Salem witch trials of 1692 in your head, the first image that is likely to pop up is that of a witch being burned at the stake. This image is wrong. Contrary to what we've been taught in school, not a single person who was executed during this period of religious fanaticism that was the Salem witch trials was burned at the stake. In fact, Less than 24 of the 200 people that were accused of witchcraft were even put to death at all, as the government officials in Massachusetts put a stop to it within a year of the onset of the trials. The idea that these alleged witches were burned at the stake probably manifested out of people combining Salem with the European witch hunts of the 14 through 1700s, where the Holy Roman Empire had laws requiring convicted witches to be burned. Even then, many of those witches, also known as innocent victims, were killed via hanging, and their bodies were burned. Some of the ways the accused witches in Salem were killed may be considered worse than being burned alive. Though most of them were hanged, there were 7 cases of people found guilty of witchcraft dying in jail, possibly from starvation. In one case, Giles Corey, who refused to take a plea bargain when he was accused of being a warlock, was pressed to death by stone weights. He remained strong and defiant until the end. His final words were, "More weight, more weight." Number 5. The Kite and Key. Another myth about a founding father is that Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity while flying a kite in a thunderstorm. The problem is that electricity had already been studied and tested long before in its static form. Franklin started experimenting with it. Most historians also believe that the famous kite experiment never happened. In fact, scientists have found that if Benjamin Franklin had conducted this experiment, he would have probably been killed by the lightning. However, Franklin was one of the first to posit that lightning was made up of electricity and did use the idea of the key and kite as a thought experiment in a letter to scientist Peter Collins. Collins took the idea and made it into a practical experiment using a metal pole to conduct lightning's electricity. Because of this, Franklin is given credit for helping to discover this form of electricity. He also was one of the first to come up with the idea of positive and negative charges and even created rudimentary batteries. Number 4. 13 colonies. Though the original flag of the United States had 13 stars and 13 stripes, there were in fact only 12 colonies at the time of the country's rebellion against the British Empire. It is commonly taught that there were 13 colonies at this time, but the true story is that Delaware didn't become its own colony until June of 1776, just before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. During the first year of the Revolutionary War and the years leading up to that, Delaware, though it had its own assembly, was governed by Pennsylvania. Delaware was very proud when they became their own colony, and was even the first colony to ratify the Constitution. Number 3. Diamonds and coal. If you're a comic book fan, you may know that one of the ways Superman's strength is described is that he's strong enough to crush coal into diamonds. You also may have had this idea confirmed by teachers telling you that diamonds are formed from coal. This is false. It has some basis in reality in the fact that diamonds and coal are both made out of carbon, and both are formed in a similar manner underground due to years and years of pressure. But if diamonds were formed from coal, wouldn't they be found in the same places? This is an extremely rare occurrence, because when you get down to the nitty-gritty of how each of these are formed, the processes are vastly different. First off, coal, though mainly carbon, is actually a conglomerate of several elements and organic matter that have been pressed together. Diamonds, though they may have rare occurring impurities, even then only on the atomic level, are a crystallized form of pure carbon. Diamonds also have much more complicated means of formation. On Earth, diamonds can only naturally form where the pressure is upwards of 100,000 atmospheres and the temperature is thousands of degrees hot deep in the mantle. So, sorry superfans, the idea of crushing coal into diamonds is bullpucky. Number 2. Columbus. It's outstanding that Christopher Columbus is still venerated with a holiday, given all that we know of him. Not only did he not discover America, but he was also responsible for the enslaving and deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, and was even thrown in jail for torture in a time when it was the thing to do. So why is he praised as a pioneer and hero? There are a couple of factors. First, during the Revolutionary War, the American colonists had to turn to a new hero, as John Cabot, who was previously admired for discovering the land where the colonies were founded, was an Englishman. So they chose Christopher Columbus, who represented the Spanish discovery of the Americas. Second, author Washington Irving, famous for his historical fictions and the legend of Sleepy Hollow, decided to jazz up his biography of Columbus by saying that before Columbus, everyone thought the Earth was flat. In addition, the navigational tools that were used in the 1400s were dependent on the theory that the Earth was a sphere. So even Columbus's dumbest crew members, dead uncle, would have known this. Number 1. Head in the sand. If you were to draw a picture of Easter Island, it would most likely include the giant stone heads that the island is famous for. But would that picture just be of the heads, or would you include the less common images of the bodies attached to those heads? Scattered across the island, there are almost 900 of these imposing figures called Mau, which were carved by a tribe called the Rapa Nui. In schools, when many teachers talk about Easter Island, they fail to mention that these statues aren't just heads. This has a lot to do with the iconic images of the 150 statues buried in the side of a volcano that appear in many textbooks and are referenced in pop culture, showing only the elongated stone craniums. Archaeologists have known that these heads have sunken bodies since 1914. And if you look at pictures of the other statues on the island, you can plainly see the full figures. Due to years and years of misinformation and taking the textbook pictures at face value, the recent pictures of the fully excavated statues went viral, shocking millions of people who mistakenly thought that they were just heads. Some people are so adamant about their prior knowledge being correct that they were quick to label the excavation a hoax.